Reactivity in marriage is going to ruin and sabotage all of your insights, all of your skills, all of your tools if you can't get a handle on that. That is the thing that will take you out, in spite of knowing all of the things that you might have learned or researched or studied and gone through therapy and having insights around, because when we're emotionally reactive, we're not able to access the prefrontal cortex of our brain. And that's where we have the intellectual knowing. That's where we remember our tools and skills and the things that we connected the dots on before. But as soon as that emotional reactivity kicks in, we're not really able to access that. So over the next few minutes, I want to share the impact that emotional reactivity has on your relationships, what you can actually do about it strategically within the relationship, but then also more importantly, some inner strategies that you can embark upon to help yourself stay emotionally regulated when there's an upset or when there's conflict in the relationship. So the first problem that I see, there's really three main ones. The first one is that there's escalating conflict. So emotional reactivity, it leads to knee-jerk responses. We yell, we get defensive, we blame, we shut down. We just have this knee-jerk reaction that we're not conscious of at all. And instead of resolving things, it makes things feel really bad. It puts bad energy into the relationship. And then if your partner is also reactive, then you're off to the races, right? But even if your partner is not reactive, it still breaks the connection. And then it's hard to problem solve. So even minor disagreements can turn into really big blowouts when you're reactive. So one of the things you can do that's just strategically not even related to the inner work is learn how to pause and reflect. So the second that you notice that you're feeling reactive or that you're feeling some kind of way, practice not doing anything at all. You don't have to know the right thing to say. You don't have to know what to do or not to do. You just have to pause and do nothing. Like that can be a really powerful pattern interrupt, because when you widen the gap between the stimulus and the response, that's where all your power is. The longer that gap is, the more power you have over what you choose to say or do next, so that it is aligned with what your positive intentions are and what your new story is that you're trying to build in your relationship. So if you can practice even just a 30-second pause before responding, that's going to prevent you from reacting impulsively, and it will allow you time to ground yourself. Of course, if this is something that you've never done before, this might be confusing to your partner, so just be sure to let them know that you're working on that. And maybe you can develop a shared language around timeouts. Like, let's just agree together that ahead of time, when we're calm, we'll agree together that when one of us gets really triggered or reactive, that we pause and we know what that means. That means not that we're abandoning the other person, we're not ditching the conversation, we're not trying to stonewall, we're trying to set the relationship up for success. It's like protecting the relationship and saying, I'm not going to say anything that I'm going to regret, so it's better that I say nothing at all. And just have that really clear, have a shared language around that, whatever you want to call it, and set that into the culture of your relationship. That can be very powerful. The second thing that gets in the way that emotional reactivity causes, that blocks trust in the relationship, is that it will breach emotional connection, which is essentially safety, right? So when you breach that connection, you're breaching safety, you're breaching trust, you're creating an environment that feels unpredictable. Like if you're constantly reactive, like in the form of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling, acting out behaviors, that's going to lead to your partner feeling like you're the enemy, or that you see them as the enemy instead of an ally. And it can feel unpredictable and not safe as a result. Anything that feels unpredictable, anything that feels very intense and something that you feel like you can't navigate is going to feel unsafe to your nervous system. So the solution to that is you really want to build emotional awareness and empathy. So when you notice yourself feeling something and you want to react, you want to tune into, what am I feeling underneath the surface? What are the vulnerable emotions? Because when we're reacting, we're viewing our partner as an enemy. And we're probably having some kind of negative thought about them, what they're trying to do to us. Maybe it's shame-based, and later on we can recognize that, but in the moment, our subconscious mind is viewing them as somebody that's not on our side. So then we're going to react in a critical way, or we're going to treat them like somebody that they're actually not. And that's really hurtful. So if you can tune in and say, what is behind this reactivity? What need am I trying to get met? What can I ask for? What am I really feeling? And then communicate that with structure. So instead of it being really unbridled self-expression, which can be really damaging and hurtful, you want to use I statements, or what I teach, the feedback structure, where you're able to say, what's at stake for you? You're not talking about them. You can express your needs without blame. And then another thing you can do too is to have regular check-ins. So if you feel like you get reactive because things are building building up and you don't have, like, maybe you've been stuffing your feelings and you haven't had time and space to process things or to clear out hurt feelings or just repair, right? Like moment to moment, day to day, things can come up, and in a healthy relationship, you can clear that out in 5 minutes or less, and it's not even a big deal and it doesn't build up. So if you are reactive and you notice it's partly because you feel like you're going to blow a gasket, what I would recommend is setting up regular check-ins, whether it's every night, whether it's every week, 3 times a week, whatever works for you, where both partners will share feelings and needs in a calm environment. So you don't wait until you're about to lose it. You don't wait until the straw that broke the camel's back. You have regular times where it's like, I'm not even upset right now, but let's just mentally think about anything that came up that we stuffed, that we want to clear out so that it doesn't build up. And that's a really good relational strategy that can help you prevent acting on that default. And then later on, I'm going to get to what it is that you can do to prevent that default from even getting activated in the first place. But relationally, if you get on the same team and you recognize, okay, we're unifying against this pattern, we're on the same side, let's pull each other up, let's try to support each other in not being reactive. The third thing that emotional reactivity does is it keeps you stuck in repetitive negative cycles. And that's obvious, right? Because reactivity is going to reinforce the destructive cycles, whatever it is, whether you've got a pursuer distancer, whether you've got an anxious attached, you've got an avoidant attached, whatever your pattern is, it will reinforce whatever the negative dynamics are that are problematic because it's unconscious, because it's reactive, because it's not coming from your conscious intentions. It's going to reinforce the stuff that's happening when you're on autopilot. It's not going to support what you're trying to do consciously and intentionally. It reinforces the old patterns that are on that automatic reaction mode that your whole entire old story is built on. And so it's like this well-worn groove that you keep reinforcing and making deeper and deeper, and it's so much harder to get out of the groove the deeper that it gets. When you're in a conscious, intentional, and self-aware place and you're not reactive, then you're not reinforcing that, and now you're building a new one. You're creating new neural networks and a new pattern of behavior or a new dynamic that you can strengthen over time as well. And it's really about what are you feeding with your energy and what are you feeding through repetition. So what you can do to interrupt this pattern is look at what your role is in the reactive cycle. What part am I playing in the cycle and how do I interrupt that? So what do you have to do or what do you have to stop doing that would interrupt the pattern that you're in on your side of the street? That's going to be the most disruptive. And then you commit to a new way of responding, even if your partner hasn't changed yet, because if you're switching it up, they can't really respond in the same ways either. So how you can do this is just be aware of what are your personal triggers, what are the childhood attachment wounds, are there any core wounds, any limiting beliefs, any triggers that are getting activated. And the way that you learn this about yourself to become more self-aware is through journaling. You can write every day kind of like what's coming up for you. What are my automatic negative thoughts? Where is my mind going? What am I making assumptions about? How do I really feel? And what do I really want? Even just those 3 questions. What do I think? What am I feeling? And what do I really want? If you did that every day with journaling and then you read through it, you would start to become aware of patterns, because there's 2 parts of us. There's the observer part of us, and then there's the part of us that's having the experience. When you're writing it down, the observer part is taking over and observing and then sharing on the page. Then later, the part of you that's in the experience that doesn't have the capacity to like take a 30,000 foot view can read through in black and white. And then you have an idea of, oh, so this is what I notice about myself. And that's really important. Self-awareness is the key in emotional regulation. Knowing yourself and knowing where the danger zone is, like you'll start to notice I blow a gasket when I start thinking these thoughts. When I start having specific thought patterns, or I start going into a certain mode of being, or even my partner can tell something is coming up for me, that's my cue that I need to tune into myself and take care of myself and figure out a different way of expressing myself so that I don't get reactive, right? And that just takes practice and repetition. Now, some other tools that I think will really help you, some other techniques. There's a couple. There's some that's based on the research supporting the new evidence that they're finding about the connection between the vagus nerve and our own emotional state. We understand the cognitive aspect of changing our feelings, change the way we think about things, and that will change how we feel, because the meaning that we give something obviously informs our emotional reaction. But that requires us to use a part of our brain that we can't really access when we are really triggered. So what you can do is you can use somatic practices, basically. Somatic meaning we're engaging the body. We're trying to bypass the prefrontal cortex and notice what's going on in our body and use physical techniques that will help us feel better in the moment right away. So one of those is slow diaphragmatic breathing, where you're really pulling your diaphragm out, and like when you do that, it pulls air in, and you're, kind of like if you push your stomach out and it pulls air into your lungs, you're going to get a much deeper breath than if you're breathing from up here in your lungs. And what that does is it stimulates the vagal tone, and it slows the heart rate, and it reduces cortisol. And another thing you can do with breathing is you breathe in for half as long as you breathe out. So if you breathe in 3, then you're going to exhale 6. And even better, hold your breath for a few counts in between. That does something physiologically too to lower your heart rate. It helps with sleep as well, and it just calms you down. And if you even just did like 6 cycles of these, studies have shown that this will greatly reduce your cortisol. You should try it and just see how you feel afterwards. It feels like it won't work, but when you do it, and it's like the last thing you feel like doing when you are emotionally reactive, to have to stop and then focus on breathing, but it really, really works. Another thing that works is cold exposure. This is true for full cold plunging, but I'm not talking about that now. Cold plunging is awesome for a lot of reasons, but cold exposure just for your face and neck will also activate the vagus nerve via what's called the diving reflex. And what this does is it blasts you and it startles you and it arouses your parasympathetic nervous system. You take in a deep breath. It kind of like what you'll feel is it wakes you up and it will reset your nervous system. And this is something that they talk about too in dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, mindfulness practices for people that have thoughts of harming themselves or suicidal ideation. If you can startle yourself with the cold water, put your face in ice. Some people do this just because they want to reduce puffiness in their face, but it actually does something to your mood and changes your emotional state. Anything that brings you into your senses, where you're not thinking, you're not in your head, you're grounding yourself with what you can perceive through sight, sound, taste, what you can smell, aromatherapy, hot baths, anything that brings you present to what you're feeling as opposed to what you're thinking about. And I think we get that confused. Ruminating is not the same thing as feeling. Another thing that really helps is humming or chanting or singing or even gargling. Vibrations will stimulate the vagus nerve along with the vocal cords and throat. And this is why singing feels good for people. Humming can be a self-soothing thing that calms you down. There's something to be said about the vibrational frequency, and that sound therapy will do something like when you listen to those singing bowls, those Tibetan singing bowls, or if you have something that vibrates in your hand that you can feel is like rippling out into the nerves of your hand and your arm, can also go into the rest of your body. Or if you put your earbuds in and you listen to certain kinds of music at certain kinds of frequencies, and there's different research about which frequencies for which things, it really will make a difference in your brain waves. And so you don't have to think your way out of it. You don't have to tell yourself positive thoughts in order to emotionally regulate. The reason why that works is just purely because of the frequency of sound and what that does to your body. It calms the emotional centers of your brain. Now, how I touched on mindfulness meditation in DBT, and an example would be if I'm looking at the leaves outside and the sun is on the leaves and the wind is blowing and they're kind of flickering in the wind, and I'm just noticing what I see. I'm just observing it. Or I'm feeling the sand under my feet, or I'm smelling something like lavender, or whatever it is. You're just tuning into what it is that you're feeling, like I mentioned, reduces the amygdala reactivity and increases the prefrontal cortex engagement, because you're just observing and you have to be mindful to observe it. In order to tune into it, you have to use that part of your brain, but it brings you into your conscious mind and out of the automatic interpretation and like the amygdala thing, that reptilian brain that kicks in and puts you into fight or flight. And that's what causes the reactivity. I think what they recommend is like 10 to 20 minutes a day of body scan, like go through what you notice in your body. Is it a tightness of breath? Are your shoulders tight? Are you not breathing? Like, what do you notice when you start to ramp up and when you're getting reactive? And if you just do this 10 to 20 minutes a day, you start to connect more with what your body's doing when you're calm. You don't have to be reactive to notice, like you don't have to do this when you're reactive. You can do this when you're calm, and then you notice what your baseline is. You're tuned into that so that the farther you get away from that baseline, the more likely you are to notice it. I know how calm I can feel, and that's not how I feel right now. It's time to tune back into myself again and either put my face in cold water or do some meditation. And you play around with these things, right? Like you're not going to do all of the things all of the time, but I'm giving you these ideas to play around with and find what works for you. Then there's loving kindness meditations, which is just increasing the positive affect of like tuning into the things that you're grateful for, wishing good things upon others as a daily practice, actually not in the moment that you're feeling activated, but if you build that into your practice, people talk about gratitude journals at night or morning practices of setting your intentions. Some people will do it in the form of, I pray for so-and-so, or I'm sending positive energy to people that I really love and care about. Even people that are struggling right now that I'm not even getting along with, right? When you tune into that consciously, not in the moment of conflict, not in the moment of dysregulation, but build that into a daily practice, that also activates the vagal pathways. That also brings your baseline to a higher level so that you're much more uncomfortable when you get dysregulated. The problem is when we are comfortable with emotional dysregulation. That is our baseline, so we just aren't as likely to notice it when it happens because it's our default. It's just how it always is. So the more that you raise your baseline and you have more and more experiences of feeling calm, feeling connected, feeling okay, feeling grounded in your body, the more likely you are to notice it and get ahead of it before you react when you do get triggered. And then finally, I want to mention EFT tapping. So there's EFT, emotion focused therapy. That's a couples modality that was developed by Dr. Sue Johnson. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about emotional freedom technique. So this is the tapping. If you look it up, you can find it. But it's tapping along these meridian points while you're tuning into the emotions that you're having. And you can also just YouTube tapping for emotional dysregulation. If you look up Brad Yates, he's really good. I think Justine Yates is also really good, and they have tutorials. So when you are really in that place where you feel emotionally dysregulated, tapping is very powerful to help you move through that emotion, to metabolize the emotion. Tapping along the same meridian points that are used in acupuncture, but you're just tapping on them. So it's not like you're using needles or anything, but it's the same energy centers of the body. And the idea is that you're trying to smooth out the energy system of your body rather than trying to change how you feel through brain chemistry. You're trying to change how you feel through energy systems, which is sort of like a Chinese medicine way of looking at things. And that can help you discharge the stored stress, because a lot of times our dysregulation comes from, not just from the present moment, but from a trauma reaction from the past, like our body doesn't know the difference and it's reacting from the past, or it could just be pent up stored stuff from the week that you haven't really discharged yet. So the tapping can help you move through that to the point where you don't even notice, like you're trying to tune into the feeling and you can't even feel it anymore if you do it right. So this is something that is gaining a lot of traction in trauma recovery programs right now. It's becoming more and more popular, more and more mainstream. I would imagine in 10 years it's going to be even more mainstream, just like acupuncture used to be super fringe and now it's covered by most insurance. So I highly recommend looking into that if reactivity is a thing that has gotten in the way in your relationship, because that truly is such a saboteur when you're doing the work and you really love your partner and you get it intellectually. This is why this happens. This is what I shouldn't be doing. Here's what to do instead. And you know all the things, but the emotions get in the way and take you out and end up bringing you closer to the point of no return. So this is the thing to focus on the most, because even if your partner has things they need to grow in, and even if there's all kinds of conversations you want to have with your spouse about the dynamics, if you are reactive, this is the biggest bang for your buck in terms of focusing on yourself first. I think if you can do that, your spouse is going to be, or your partner will be more likely to join you in the relationship conversations and more likely to join you in the work and say, I want to be part of the solution. I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to get better too. But so much of the dynamic shifts when we stop becoming reactive. They don't even have to know the work that we're doing. They don't even have to be involved in it, and it can be powerful. That's it for today. If you like my content, please take a second and either like this video or subscribe to my channel, or both. That will help us reach the people that really need to hear this stuff.